athletes make skilled performances look easy. A lot of time and effort has gone into learning, practicing, and refining their skills to get them where they are today. In this program, we'll look at what skills are, how we progress to a skilled performer, how we learn skills, influencing factors, and how we can evaluate performance. Skill and ability are two terms that are often used interchangeably when we talk about an athlete's performance. However, they don't mean the same thing. Dr. Shane Hanks explains.
Ability is, in this context, a sports skill acquisition context, a more general trait. So it refers to abilities that we really have naturally and as a result, in many cases, of genetics. So the things I'm talking about are like coordination. I'm talking about dexterity, those type of abilities which are more general. And that's what we tend to mean when we talk about an ability. A skill is often referred to, again, in the same way as that, but a skill is more a specific task or a specific activity that is actually done for a specific purpose. So it's goal-directed, that is, we actually have to want to complete a skill, to execute a skill. And it's a learned behaviour, so it's a learned activity. We can learn skills, whereas abilities can be perhaps trained or conditioned.
The skills we learn and develop are critical to how well we perform. There are three types of skills: cognitive, perceptual, and psychomotor skills. Cognitive skill involves thought processes. Cognitive skill enables us to understand how to perform a skill. It also helps us to understand the strategic and tactical aspects of performance and skill execution. Perceptual skills relate to the feedback we get whilst performing a skill or movement. This feedback can come from within our body or from the environment around us. For example, when performing a floor routine in gymnastics, your perceptual skills allow you to adjust your movements as you are performing to correct errors, and you can get feedback from looking at your body position in relation to the floor area. Psychomotor skills are the pairing of the cognitive and perceptual skills while performing the activity. Successful execution of the skill will depend upon how well the athlete does this. Muscular effort describes the force used by the muscles involved. This can be divided into fine motor and gross motor skills. Fine motor skills require a small amount of muscular effort with great precision and coordination. Gross motor skills require greater force, the use of more muscle groups, and smooth coordination. The types of skills involved can be separated into discrete, serial, and continuous. A discrete skill is a single movement with a distinct start and finish, such as shooting in netball. A serial skill is a number of discrete skills performed together in a continuous sequence, like in a dance routine. A continuous skill is where the athlete decides the beginning and end of the movement. In determining the complexity of a skill, it's important to take the environment it's performed in into consideration. We can do this by referring to how open or closed the skill is. A skill can be considered closed when it is performed in a stable environment, involves limited movement, the performer determines their own pace, and the skill has a clear start and completion point. Serving in tennis and high diving are good examples. Open skills are performed in an environment that is changing in some way. This requires decisions and modifications to be made quickly. In tennis, the return serve depends on where and how hard the ball is served. The player also has limited control over the pace of the ball once it's in play. Most sports cannot be considered completely open or closed and lie somewhere in between. It's important to remember the difference between skill and ability and understand the cognitive, perceptual and psychomotor skills required in performance. Open and closed skills are determined by the presence or absence of external factors. Most skills are a varying degree of both. The unskilled performer focuses on the major components of the skill. They make a lot of errors and need a lot of external feedback to improve their performance.
Because you could apply that to...
The skilled performer has mastered the skill. They have good kinesthetic sense, therefore can correct their own errors and focus on the technical and tactical aspects of the sport.
The kinesthetic is basically the physical feedback you get from when you're performing. An unskilled athlete won't have that refined sense of where their body is in space, how it's performing, the weight of it, and what it feels like to perform a certain skill. It's only something that can be developed over time.
A skilled performer is able to anticipate where the play is going. The mental approach of the unskilled performer is less confident and they often experience a higher level of anxiety. This extra emotional stimulus further reduces their ability to react to changing conditions within the performance. Confident of their skills, the skilled performer is able to stay in the moment, successfully adapting to the ongoing changes, whilst concentrating on maintaining a consistently high level of performance.
They are often able to focus on other elements, which might include other than technique, it might include a sort of a game sense, a strategic sense of, if I was, playing football, it would be where am I in relation to the ball, where am I in relation to my opponents, where do I need to be moving forward to intercept this pass, where do I need to be to accept this pass from a teammate. The other is the tactical awareness, so it's really around how do I gain an advantage over my opponents? Decision making is probably another thing that's different in a skilled performer. They process information and act on it in a different way. They pick up pattern recognition, so they're able to recognise patterns in play and determine on the basis of a particular pattern what I should do next.
So, how do we develop from beginner to skilled performer? There are 3 stages of learning: cognitive, associative and autonomous. The cognitive stage of learning involves the learner gaining a mental or intellectual understanding of what is required to perform the skill. The individual develops a mental image of the skill and plans what their body needs to do to execute the skill.
Set yourself up
A cognitive learner needs to see a demonstration of the skill so they can have an accurate representation in their own mind.
So we're almost at full stroke.
The trainer also needs to provide clues as to what the learner needs to focus on, what the important aspects of the skill execution are. The second stage is the associative stage.
In that associative stage, it's really about fine-tuning and honing that particular skill. So a rough approximation has been performed, and then it's really about learning, trial and error. So through trial and error and understanding, well, this didn't work last time, I'm going to try something a little bit different, and then looking at the results of that. To exit the second stage and into the third stage, which is the autonomous stage, and that autonomous stage is when you don't require any conscious thought. So you can certainly be well advanced along the lines of being an expert performer, and that will happen at different rates according to one's genetic ability, according to one's motivation, willingness to learn, their learning environment. There's a whole host of factors that affect that. But it's really in that third stage that people become automatic, that they no longer have to think about the processing that's taking place, they're doing it automatically.
The differences between a skilled and unskilled performer are most apparent in kinesthetic sense, anticipation and timing, mental approach, and consistency. When learning a new skill, we progress from the cognitive stage through the associative stage to the autonomous stage. However, different people acquire skills at different rates. Learning to perform a skill involves a cyclical process of perceiving, deciding, acting, and feedback. Perceiving is the ability to grasp the key aspects of a given skill. For example, the coach shows you how to perform a swimming stroke. You listen to the instruction and see the stroke performed. Deciding refers to the processing of the information now stored in the brain and how to use it. We think how we would perform the stroke ourselves. Acting means to actually try performing the skill. Feedback occurs while we are learning the new skill. This comes from the coach in the early stages and from our body in terms of how it feels performing the skill. Practice is used to learn and develop the skill further. There are different practice techniques that can be employed depending upon the athlete and the situation. Massed practice is the repetition of the particular skill with little or no rest. A good example is shooting for goal in basketball. Studies have shown massed practice is of little benefit when learning a skill, but good for performance once the skill has been acquired. Endurance athletes, like long-distance cyclists and marathon runners, can benefit a great deal from this. It is not recommended in high-risk sports like gymnastics or high diving, where full cognitive ability is needed to perform the skill safely.
Distributed practice is generally considered the most efficient form of practice. It's basically where you take small components and you practice it in small components with lengthy rest breaks in comparison to the practice. So it allows you to fight off the effects of fatigue. It allows your mind to be fresh and your mental alertness to be fresh. It also helps with motivation of the athlete in terms of they're not doing the same activity over the stretch of an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, so they stay a lot fresher in that respect.
Part practice is applied when a particular skill is broken down into smaller components, and each of these discrete skills is practiced. Whole practice method is when the skill is practiced in one fluid motion. A key aspect of these practice methods is the mental attitude of the individual.
A person can't master a skill without the proper attitude. It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes commitment for them to overcome those little errors that we all make when starting to learn a new skill. So it's vital. You can't have an elite athlete without the right attitude.
Once the fundamentals of a skill or sport have been learnt, there are a range of performance elements that also need to be mastered at the autonomous stage if success is to be achieved. First and foremost, technique needs to be well honed and well executed in all conditions. Decision making is crucial. Seeing what's going on around you, processing that information, and deciding what to do next. Strategic understanding helps the athlete make a decision because they know where they need to be in relation to their teammates and the opponents. Anticipating what is likely to happen next and having that tactical awareness gives the athlete an advantage over the opponent. Incredibly, all this needs to happen automatically in the athlete's mind in a split second. We learn through a cyclical process of perceiving, deciding, acting, and feedback. There are varied methods used to learn and develop skills: massed, distributed, whole, and part. A positive mental attitude is vital to the mastery of skills. Quick decision making, strategic understanding, tactical awareness, and correct technique taken to the autonomous level are the essential ingredients of the skilled performer. There are factors that influence how well we learn and perform skills. The characteristics of the learner play a significant role, such as their desire to learn a new skill, preparedness to make mistakes, take advice and learn from others, determination to master that skill, and the motivation to then succeed in the competitive arena. Self-confidence, maturity, and self-belief are also contributing factors. During high-pressure moments, the confident, skilled performer can still function at their optimal level, blocking out pressure and external distractions. The hereditary or genetic traits we inherit from our parents may determine whether we have the right physique for a given sport. A tall person already has a key attribute if they wish to play basketball, for instance. How well skills are learned and performed is also affected by environmental conditions. These environmental conditions include the state of the playing area, weather conditions, the presence or absence of spectators, the referees and officials, levels of professionalism, and understanding of the sport. For beginners, it is better to learn and practice skills in familiar, stable surroundings until skills are being performed autonomously. Training practices. The different styles and methods for the learning and refining of skills vary from coach to coach. A coach may provide demonstrations of the correct way to execute the skill and visually illustrate the process using coaching boards. This is particularly useful in tactical team sports like football, hockey, and basketball. Varying the training practices can be advantageous depending on the athlete's skill level. Creative coaches, those that think outside the square, can also help to get the best out of the performer.
As part of the learning environment, you would also include the coach or the instructor and the various type of skills that they have, the type of feedback and modelling and demonstration and also reinforcement that they are giving all has an impact on the learning.
Characteristics of the learner, their personality, genetic makeup, confidence, prior experiences and innate ability are all influencing factors, including the learning environment, such as the playing field, weather, and the opposition. When we evaluate a sporting performance, we use various types of feedback. Internal feedback is what our body tells us when we perform the skill. For example, we receive sensory and kinesthetic feedback during a gymnastics routine. The kinesthetic feedback is from our muscles, as well as sensory information from sight, hearing, and touch. External feedback is the feedback we get from our coach, other players, video analysis, game results, and judges' scores. Concurrent feedback is feedback received and processed during the performance of the skill. Alternatively, delayed feedback occurs once the skill has been completed. Delayed feedback can be divided into knowledge of results and knowledge of performance. Knowledge of results are the quantified aspects of the athlete's performance. What time they ran for the marathon, or how many aces served in a game of tennis. Ideally, we want the athlete to create a kinesthetic memory of the correct action. When the tennis serve is performed correctly, we want the player to consistently reproduce that serving technique. Once we have collected this kind of feedback, we can then judge the performance.
I think there's a number of criteria that are used to judge a performance. Let's begin with how closely our performance approximates that of a skilled performer. We may judge on the basis of not only successful execution but form. So how easily it's executed. Skilled performers tend to execute skills with an ease of energy. They don't seem hurried. They deal with a minimal effort.
We also have subjective and objective judging criteria. Subjective is how we feel about our performance. rating ourselves against criteria that we subjectively determine. It is particularly important for beginners to set realistic and attainable goals. We can judge ourselves in terms of effort, or did we perform the task better than last time? It also relates to how the athlete feels while performing the skill, how they think it looks. Objective criteria could be time for the 100-metre sprint or distance in long jump. The measurement of skills is another good way to evaluate a performer and gain information for future improvement. So, what can we measure?
You've got 6 basic components. You've got speed, which is the speed a body part moves. You've got reaction time, which is the ability for the body to react to an object or an action, such as a ball coming towards you. You've got agility, and your ability to change direction at will, which is important. Balance, ability not to fall over, essentially. Coordination, which is the psychomotor skills from your brain to your body, so your ability to coordinate your brain and your body together. And then you've got power, which is, your ability to strike harder, kick further, or sprint faster.
When conducting tests, it is important to measure one factor at a time and ensure that the athletes understand exactly what the task involves. It is also good to reduce environmental factors that may affect the tests, such as weather, and thus work in a more closed environment. Standardisation of tests will give more reliable information upon which the athlete can improve. The types of feedback used to evaluate performance are internal and external, concurrent or delayed. When judging a performance, comparing techniques and outcomes and our own personal expectations is vital, as well as objective criteria such as time, distance and form. Acquiring and developing skills for an elite performance is a complex and challenging task. But while training a performance can be very hard work, it's important to keep in mind that sport should be enjoyable and personally satisfying at every level.